When it comes to window coverings, roller blinds are quick, easy and inexpensive to fit. So today I'm going to show you how. Fitting a roller blind is a really quick way of adding privacy and cutting out the daylight, and it's a really inexpensive way of adding colour and texture to any room. This one I'm going to be fitting today I've just bought from the range, and although it's the widest one they do at 1.8 metres and it's fairly heavy material because it's a blackout blind, still cost me less than £30, which I think is quite a good deal. They come in different widths, starting at 600mm, that's 2 foot wide, going all the way up to this 6 foot wide version, and they're easy to fit and I think make a great weekend project. They can be fitted to windows in different ways. So let me take this out of the box, and on the window I'll show you how. So unfortunately I had to go for the 1.8 metre wide version because the 1.4 metre wide version was just a few millimetres too narrow. But anyway, these things happen. So the two ways that you can fix these to your windows are, the first way is just to put it on the outside of the window on the wall. These are called face fix. And it's essentially putting the bracket up here on the face of the wall and putting the blind in front of the window completely. Now this is easier because you don't have to trim the blind and it's very easy just to fit into the wall at either end. The other way of doing it, which is the way I prefer to be honest with you, is to fit it within this recess. So if I can maybe just show you. Something like that, although it's obviously at an angle. And within this recess, you can also fit it in two different ways. You can fit it to the underside of the soffit of this opening, or you can fit it on the face of the window as well. So there's, even within the recess, there's two different ways of fitting it. Now obviously doing it this way, you need to cut it down to the right width, because unless you're really lucky, you're not going to be able to buy a blind that's exactly the right width for your window. So if you're going to do it this way, you have to make sure that the blind says that you can trim to width, and most of them do. Now, in the fixing that I've decided to do today, I don't really want to drill into my UPVC windows. So I'm going for the hanging type from the underside of this recess. Whichever way you do fit it though, remember to check that you've got enough drop on the blind. And the drop is essentially the amount of material once it's unrolled. So I know the drop on this blind is 1.6 metres and the height of my window is 1 metre, so I've got plenty to play with. Right, let's get on and start trimming this blind to the right width. And the way we're going to start that is by measuring that dimension. So I found somewhere big enough to roll the blind out, and I've taken out the middle aluminium rod. And with a tape measure, I can now measure, mark and cut it to width. And here's a little tip for you. It's easier to work out how much to take off this fabric than to work out how much fabric we need to keep and then cut that. And I'll tell you for why. The fabric isn't the same as the overall width that we want the blind, because we've got brackets either side, and also the fabric is a few millimetres smaller than the aluminium pole that it hangs on as well. So rather than trying to calculate all of that and work out how much we need to keep, it's easier to work out how much we need to get rid of, because it's the original width of the blind, which is 1.8 metres, minus the width that we need for the alcove, which is 1.42. The difference being 38 centimetres or 380. So as long as we just take off 380 from the fabric and the same from the pole, top and bottom, then everything should fit. With a fine pen, I mark the 380mm position on the back of the blind from one edge as accurately as I can. While I'm doing this, I'm being careful not to kneel on the fabric, as I think on this carpet, if I did, I'd end up stretching the blind and permanently having a knee-shaped bulge in it forevermore. There's two ways of cutting it to width, and that's either using scissors or, as I am here, a nice sharp utility knife or Stanley knife. To do it this way, I'm using a thin, clean board underneath the fabric, so I've got something to push against and I don't cut through to the carpet. This is definitely one of those occasions where measuring twice and cutting once is definitely the way to go, as you've only got one chance to do this right. Cut down the inner aluminium pole to length. I do the same thing and aim to remove 380mm. To help me get the cut square to its length, I wrap a piece of paper around the pole, making sure that it overlaps exactly with itself. This way I know that it's exactly square, and I follow this line all the way round with the hacksaw. I use a file to tidy up the rough end and then cut the bottom bead that sits in the fabric and helps it hang in flat in the same way. Before I position the hanging brackets and drill, I just offer up the trimmed blind just to make sure that things are looking correct. And I can see here that the bracket on either side needs to come in from the wall maybe 3 or 4mm. Here I'm using a thin piece of 12mm ply just as a spacer to space the bracket away from the window equally on either side. Each bracket has an adjustment that I can move them left and right about 5mm in total. So although I'm trying to get each one as accurate as possible, I know that I've got some adjustment either way once they're in place. And here's a little tip that I've learnt from bitter experience. If you're drilling near to a wall like this, then there's a high chance that your revolving chuck is going to damage the face of the wall that you're drilling along. So here I'm just sticking a piece of cardboard onto the wall to protect it from the drill while I'm drilling into the soffit. You can actually see the scrape marks and the damage I've made on the cardboard here from the revolving chuck, which I would have made on the wall and damaged the paintwork if I hadn't have protected it. With the screws in place, the bracket slips over them and then I can tighten everything up. Today, rather than the envelope method to catch the dust, I'm using the make a mess and vacuum it up afterwards technique, which is really easy with this portable vacuum that I've got from Evolution. So the last thing I have to decide before I put the blind up is on which side I want to mount this pulley system that pulls the blind up and down. Now in a lot of cases that might be obvious depending on how the room is laid out and what's in the way. Here I can mount it on either side, so I can get to either side, but both my wife and I are right-handed, so I'm going to mount it on the left. See, I think it's going to be easier to grab with my right hand if it's on the left rather than it being on the right, because that way I won't hit my knuckles on the wall. And also we tend to stand here by the sink, which tends to just be on the left hand side as well. So that's the side I'm going to mount it on. If I ever need to change it, all you need to do is actually take it down and you can swap it fairly easily from one side or the other. So if it doesn't work out, I can always change it. to fit the blind onto the brackets, the end with the pulley system just slides in, and then the other end slips into a notch before sitting nicely in its final position. And then this is secured in place by a plastic spacer that then fills the notch, stopping the blind from ever coming out accidentally if it's knocked. These pulley cord systems have been the cause of some accidents with children in the past, so it's important to adjust them to the correct length and then to properly secure the bottom loop with a hook system to keep it tight and in place along the wall. So there you are, job is complete. And I've just adjusted this hook so it's sitting at the back rather than the front. It means it doesn't have to go through this loop while you're pulling it down, which means it just runs a lot smoother. It fits really well, and even in the middle of the day, it's pretty well black out as well. So I hope you've enjoyed this video. If you have, please check out the other ones on the channel and please subscribe and go and have a look at our Patreon page where you can support the channel and see extra weekly videos as well. So until next time, I think I'll just leave that down.